Good morning. Good morning to all my listeners in Jamaica. Good morning as well. No, not good morning. Good afternoon. I'm sorry. But as well to the listeners in the New York diaspora. It's a new year, 2023. We are at the 9th of January now. It's a brand new year, and I want to extend to all the listeners of this program and to all the staff and so on here at Bridge 99, extend best wishes for the year. We're going to face many challenges as we do every year, but I hope that the respite that we would have experienced over the Christmas and New Year holiday would have allowed us to be reinvigorated, strengthened, re-inspired to face the challenges of this year. This is Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. We broadcast here from Kingston, but we are transmitted as well through Jam in the New York area. So welcome to the program. You know, an issue that has been the subject of some controversy is something called the Constituency Development Fund, referred to popularly as the CDF. This is a fund which is approved in the annual budget, which is approved by Parliament. It is a fund that provides $20 million for each constituency to enable members of Parliament to respond to urgent needs at the community level. Needs that the general programs of the various government departments and agencies are unable or have failed to address. Let me give some context, some background. You know, in some countries, in the developed countries, like in Europe, America, they have a different system of government than we have. I mean, take America, for example. They have the federal government, which is what Mr. Joe Biden presides over. Then you have the state governments. Each state has a governor, and it has its own parliament. And then you have the city government. And then you have the town governments. You know, in America, you have some areas, you know, with a population of 1,000 people. And they have a mayor for the 1,000 people. And they have a council that administers the affairs of that little town. So it's several layers of government. And each layer, of course, has different responsibilities. So when you're dealing with things like, you know, roads, that's not the federal government responsibility. They deal with the major highways and the, you know, that connect the states. But like roads in communities, that is not even the state government. That is some lower level government. And they raise taxes, and they get funds provided by the state and in some instances by the federal government. So the people in those communities, when it comes to dealing with things like roads and garbage collection and street lights and things like that, they have their own little government there that deals with that, so that their congressman don't have to worry himself about that. Their congressman goes to Congress and he takes part in debates on bills, and he introduces bills to to the Congress and so on. And he's judged on the basis of how well he performed that particular function. The same to a large extent applies to many other countries in Europe. But in a small country like ours, which is still struggling for development, our situation is vastly different. You know, you have elections every 5 years or so, and you elect a member of parliament. What it is that you expect of that member of parliament? What do you judge him by? You know, one of the biggest complaints that people have is the roads. And who the whole responsible for the road? The MP. The MP is supposed to make sure that the road look after properly. The street lights. The water supply. People don't have no water. And these are the things that Jamaican voters use to judge the performance of an MP. You listen to the complaints that you hear on the call-in programs. You watch when people decide they can't take it no more and they take to the streets and they demonstrate. Demonstrating against the MP because the road not fixed. So an MP in Jamaica, they've been talking for a long time about the need for a job description. Well, one of the reasons why we don't have no job description is that you can't write it. An MP is responsible for everything that no other person is responsible for. So, you know, back to school coming up. People have children, they have to find the uniforms and the books and the lunch money and everything. Who they look to? The MP. Now, there are some people who argue, well, the MP must run them. No, that's not my job. I wasn't put here to find money to give you to go back to school. Well, those people who argue that, they live in a different world. Because the voter is going to say, well, look, my number one problem now is to send my children back to school. So what's the point in my voting if you tell me, say, that is not your job? Then if it's not your job, it's who I must turn to, where I must go. That's the reality. That's just the harsh reality of what is happening on the ground. Now, one may argue, well, you know, government ought to have systems in place and programs and agencies to deal with that. Well, apart from those people who are on the PATH program, when school coming up and you have 3 children now that have to go to school, so you have 3 sets of uniform and 3 sets of book lists that you have to find money for. You tell me which government agency you go to. Where you go, Parish Council? Where you go, Ministry of Social Security? Which part you go? You go to tax office? They're going to run you? We don't deal with those things. Then who is to deal with them? So they find themselves at AMP office. Sometimes when you hear that MPs are not seen, 6 months now, I'm not see the MP, sir. Well, one of the reasons why you don't see them sometimes is that them hiding from you. Because they don't have the resources to be able to respond to the things that the people them vote you in to do. If the people vote you in because they expect that you're going to fix the roads and you're going to provide them with the pipes so that we can get water, you can lecture to them till kingdom come. Tell them, well, that's not the job of the MP. The MP is supposed to make representation. Make representation to who? So when the road bad and no taxi will drive on the road, and the people start to fuss and protest and hold a placard and block road, what is the MP to do? Well, you know, I made representations, you know. See the letters here, the copies of the letters I've written to the National Works Agency. I have made strong representations on your behalf. Well, if people look at you and say, well, we never vote for you to make representation. We vote to you to fix the road. And don't matter tell me about National Works Agency supposed to do this. And I never vote for them. National Works Agency never hold a meeting in a district and tell me that I must vote for them because they will fix road. I vote for you. And one of the problems of our politics, one of the difficulties in terms of our representational politics is that the member of parliament, worst of all is that MP is an opposition MP, where you're not close to the government. So, government will kind of help out the moon sometimes. Both governments do it. But if you're around the other side, particularly if you give them a hard time in parliament, you suck salt and not you suck the salt. The road that you live on is good. It is the people that you represent, the people who send you there. And the people who believe that when they send you there, you're going to look after them roads. So we have a kind of mismatch in terms of a member of parliament is supposed to be a legislator. He's supposed to take part in passing laws and exercising oversight over the government to make sure that the government is doing its job and to make sure that all the agencies of government are functioning properly and performing their responsibilities. Well, try tell that to the voters who still have to go down to Riverside to go catch water. And when drought time come around, there's no water to catch. I don't know how bad it is now, but I mean, I used to, in some rural areas, I used to see little children. Can't be more than 5 or 6 or 7 years old, walking with a little plastic pail on them head because they are sent down to some little hole somewhere to go catch water. Those people believe, they argue, they insist, and it's not an unreasonable position for them to take, that they shouldn't have to do that. The only person that they look to is the MP, because the MP is the one who come and say, well, vote for me and I will make sure that the quality of your life is improved. So if what is holding back the quality of your life is that you don't have no water, well, we're going to deal with that. We're going to find a way to provide the water. Now, back in 2008, that's what, 15 years ago, we introduced, and I accept responsibility for it because it was my concept. It was a commitment that I had given to the people of Jamaica prior to the 2007 elections. It was part of the JLP manifesto on which we campaigned and on which we won that election. And the commitment was that we were going to set aside a small portion of the budget. Small, when I say small, half of 1%. Half of 1% of the budget. We are going to set that aside to provide a fund which would have been divided equally among all the constituencies. So, JLP constituency not getting no more than the PNP constituency. Every MP, the same amount is going to be allocated. And that fund was intended to provide a little relief. Listen to me carefully. A little relief, because it started out at $20 million. It's still at $20 million for each constituency. Now, I say a little relief because $20 million can't do much, If you go in a rural constituency and you look at one road that need to be fixed and ask the works agency to give you an estimate. And they will tell you, well, it's going to cost you $50 million to fix this road. Because you have to put in a culvert here, you have to put in a little bridge there, and you have to, widen corners and that kind of thing. So $20 million is a pittance of money. But what it would have done, and what it was intended to do, was to provide some resources so that a member of parliament go into a community and the community say, look, chief, a long time now we go Riverside go catch water, and the pipeline stop half-mile down the road. Now, half-mile down the road, you probably need 100 lengths of 2-inch pipe to just take that water into that community. I don't know how much that would cost. Maybe $500,000, maybe $1 million. But it would enable that MP who perhaps has been making representations from the donkey was a cubby to get the pipeline extended so that then people could get the water and stop having to go down the riverside. Write letter till him tired. Lead the deputation, delegation till him tired. Get up in the house and plead till him tired. And nothing is done. But if it's $1 million it needs to provide some pipeline that will bring water to a community, small community, maybe 100 people live there, but they are voters, and they deserve to be represented, and they deserve the water, the same water that you and I may turn on every morning to brush our teeth. They deserve that facility too. So the MP would be able to say, well, all right, out of the 20 million, I would like to have 1 million set aside to run some pipes so that the people at Grass Peace can get a little water. You don't have to go sit down outside the office of the president of the Water Commission. You don't have to write no more letter. A fund would be there so that you could respond to these basic needs. And as I say, it's only 20 million, so if you spend 1 million to run the little pipeline, is 19 left. You have children who have to go back to school. You have children of poor parents who have, the parents them sacrifice, send the pit in them to school. Encourage them, coax them. And some of them do well. And they get to the stage now where they want to go to university. They apply to UWI or they apply to UTech and they are accepted. But they don't have the money to pay the tuition. So you put the MP in a position where you could say, well, all right, out of the 20 million, I want 5 million to be used to provide some assistance for students going back to school or going on to university. So a student who want to go to university and the tuition is $300,000 for the year, the parents them struggle. Them sell the 2 cow that them have, but them still short. They could get 100,000 out of this program. That's what the program was intended to do. And if you read the Gleaner editorials, I don't know how many editorials the Gleaner has written about this Constituency Development Fund. I don't think there's any other subject that they have written more editorials about, calling it a slush fund. That it should be scrapped. MP shouldn't have access to any resources. You must leave that to the bureaucrats. Which bureaucrats? Which bureaucrats? So when that mother have to look on her daughter and say, well, listen, I'm sorry, I know you want to go to university, but me can't find it. Which bureaucrat she used to go to? And when the bureaucrat don't perform, who going to hold that bureaucrat responsible? He never run no election. He never beg no vote. The MP can't fire the bureaucrat because the bureaucrat is protected. Under the Constitution, he can't be fired unless him thief money or something like that. So who is the voter to turn to? And who is the voter to hold responsible? You have not performed well. The quality of my life has not improved. Simple basic things that could have made my life a little easier have not been done. Who are you going to hold responsible for that? The superintendent of roads and work down at parish council? The market clerk? The tax collector? They hold the MP responsible. Because the people are saying, look, you are the only person that we have. You are the only person who we authorize. We vote for you. We give you the authority. And we expect that you're going to be able to use that authority to improve the quality of our lives. That's the reality on the ground. Now let me go further and say this. When I was conceptualizing that program, one of the concerns I had was that, we can't afford to allow MPs um, to handle that money as if it's money in the pocket. Because you know what would happen. And therefore, what I did was I laid out a framework, and let me explain it to you. First of all, each constituency would be required to have a constituency consultative committee that would oversee and monitor the program. That committee was to have representatives from both major parties. So, for example, if I'm a JLP MP in this constituency, the PNP would be asked to name a representative, whether it is their caretaker or whoever, to sit on that committee, and vice versa. If it's a PNP MP, the JLP would name a representative to sit on the committee. And then the committee was also to include people from the community, civic leaders. And therefore, the custos of the parish, who is the kind of governor general for the parish, would appoint, community representatives. I can't remember the numbers. It wasn't going to be a big unwieldy committee. That committee would be responsible for monitoring the program, for identifying the projects that are to be funded from the program, and that committee would be required to send a report annually to Parliament to say, now look, this is what we have done for the year. This is how the $20 million has been allocated. We have monitored the project and we are satisfied that the money has been well spent. We are satisfied that there has been no victimization of people using this money. So it's not a matter that the JLP look after JLP and the PNP look after PNP. They would be required to send in a report each year. In addition, the program would be audited, a 100% audit of the program. Let me explain what I mean by 100%. When the Auditor General does her audit of government, agencies and ministries and so on, she does random audits, because there's no way. She don't have the staff. She couldn't audit every penny. So what she does is that each year she picks certain government agencies and she goes in and she audits a portion of their expenditure. And what she does works out at, last time I checked, was less than 5% of the government accounts that were audited by the Auditor General. But it's done randomly. So nobody can tell her what to audit and what not to audit. She decides where she goes in and she sends her team in. With the Constituency Development Fund, I had insisted that this can be a random audit. Every penny of the $20 million would have to be subject to audit and a special report, other separate and apart from the Auditor General's report. A separate report be submitted to Parliament outlining how this money was spent, what were the projects, whether the projects were completed, whether they were completed within budget, and so on. In addition to that, and this is important, an MP functions, you wait for the budget to pass, then you start running from one ministry to the next ministry, begging the minister, boy, help me out with this gully, help me out with this river training, help me out with this piece of road, help me out with this school because the school is falling down, it needs repairs. So you go around begging. You're a mendicant. You beg. And most MPs will tell you that with all the begging they're doing, they're not getting much. What we outlined to be the approach with the Constituency Development Fund is that once an MP is elected, within the first 6 months, he was required, A, to have the Constituency Consultative Committee set up, and to prepare, through the committee, a 5-year development plan for his constituency, outlining what it is that he plans to spend this $20 million each year on. Because there may be some things that, you can't do it all in 1 year, so you may start it this year and you finish it next year. So prepare a plan and submit that plan to Parliament. And there's a committee in Parliament which would consider the plan. And once it is satisfied that the plan is sound, it is, projects are well identified, the projects are considered to be important, they approve the plan. And that is the plan that would guide the program, the expenditure of that $20 million over the 5-year period. Naturally, there would have to be flexibility. I mean, you have a hurricane and all of a sudden you have to divert, you have to reallocate funds to deal with that and so on. But the whole thing was intended simply to empower MPs and through the empowerment of MPs to empower people, so that people would be able to see an MP that is able to respond. And respond in a way that is more than say, well, I have written a letter to the public service company begging them to just run the lines a little further so that you can get light. The MP would be able to say, well, look, it is part of my program. And they may say, well, that's not on the program for this year, so you have to go live without it. But next year, it is in the program for next year. And next year, you're going to be able to see some relief. That is what was intended. Now, as I said, the Gleaner editorial is the main antagonist. That this program should never have been introduced and it should be scrapped. But there are others. There are other people who have criticized it. I'd hope to get some of them on the program today, but that don't seem to be working out. But that was the intention. Now, I will say quite clearly that the way the program has been operating falls far short of how it was conceptualized. I don't know of any constituency consultative committee. I don't know of it. I know that some MPs do have community meetings where they discuss the proposed projects and they get suggestions from the communities and so on. But the kind of structured way that I had conceived that the program would operate, that has fallen short. I am not aware that MPs are required to submit any 5-year plan. And that I consider to have been important, because that is what would give you some idea as to the priorities in a particular constituency, and you'd be able to measure the impact that the program has in that constituency. I'm not aware of any special audit being done of the Constituency Development Fund. It is audited, but it is audited, in the same way that other government agencies are audited, random audits. And I had wanted a full, complete, 100% accounting for those funds. But as far as I am concerned, the concept was sound, and perhaps if we had attached to it all of these, I don't want to call them strictures, but all of these requirements that were in the conceptualization of the program, then maybe some of the criticism that it has attracted would not have been so harsh. But if you listen to MPs, and MPs from both sides of the House, they're asking for an increase. It started out at 20 billion, and I think it had to be reduced to 10 million when we ran into fiscal difficulties. Then it came back up to 20. The half of 1% of the budget that I had in mind, if we had been able to achieve that level, then I think you'll be talking now about something like $75 million per constituency each year, which is not a lot of money. Not a lot of money, because you take one road, as I said, one road can take you $40 million to repair. Let me take a break and come back. Welcome back. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. We're talking about the Constituency Development Fund. I've had a long run on it, and I want to start talking with our guests. But let me just finish up with just a couple of points. I would love to. I spent decades as a member of parliament, and my job would have been so easy if what I had to concern myself with is legislation, so that you have bills coming to parliament and you study them carefully and you do your research and you put your arguments as to whether you agree with it, if you don't agree with it, what you think should be done, how you think it should be improved. Participating in committees where you question government officers as to how they are doing their job. I mean, that's easy work, right? Not easy work. But if that is all that an MP has to do, then an MP's job life would be much easier than it is now. But after you finish doing all those wonderful things in Parliament and you go back to your constituency, what you say to them? When they hit you with a barrage of complaints, what you tell them? Well, I've been working very hard. I introduced 4 bills in Parliament and I moved several motions. And I sit on the Public Accounts Committee, so I gave the Works Agency hell when they couldn't explain how they spend their money. And the man I'm looking at, he said, well, we hear that. What we do for we? Now, one of the arguments that the Gleaner editorial has put forward is that when it comes to selecting projects, identifying projects, MPs should have nothing to do with that. That should be left to the government bureaucrats. So it is the man at Works Agency who must decide which road is to be fixed. It is the people on that Water Commission who will decide where they're going to run pipelines and which communities are to be served. So you take 1 year, and the man at Works Agency, him don't bother identifying no roads in your constituency, because as far as he's concerned, higher priorities elsewhere. Plus, what's the point in spending money to build 2 miles of road and it's only a couple hundred people live up there? What you tell your people then? Well, don't blame me. Blame the Works Agency, man. You want them to run you out of the place? So you are supposed to represent the people. What you have to do? Go down to the Works Agency office and sit down outside the project manager door and get down on your knees and beg him. Said, look, sir, I can't go back to that area if I don't get some money to fix the road. So beg you, help me out. So the Works Agency man is the one that have the power. You don't have no power. You begging him. But when was he elected? What mandate did he get from the people? Now you get the mandate. Now if you get the mandate, how are you to discharge that mandate? If you don't have, and remember what I said earlier, the $20 million in the constituency development, well, it's just a little token, just a little token. You're not saying that the whole budget must be divided into 60. And every MP get a big chunk of it so that he can now go and do what he wants with it. $20 million, that's all. As I say, if we were able to stick to the half of 1% of the budget, it probably would be about 75 million now. Which is what I think it should be, to be quite honest with you. But the argument continues. I want to bring on the program someone who can give us an interesting perspective, because both as a public commentator, which he has been for many, many years, but also as one who served in Parliament for a while and had experience in the Constituency Development Fund. I'm talking about the governor from the Republic of Montego Bay, Sir Lloyd B. Smith. Do we have him online? Not yet. We're trying to see if we can hook up with Lloyd. Because, as I say, he will give us a good perspective. I mean, he can... I'm sorry? Oh, I'm being advised that we have another guest who is going to come on, Miss Jeanette Calder. She's Executive Director of the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, JAMP. Jeanette, are you there?
I am. Good to be with you. Happy New Year, Mr. Gold.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.
Glad to have you back on the program.
Always good to be with you.
You made some comments recently about the operation of the Constituency Development Fund. You want to share them with us?
Yes, I believe the Gleaner had reached out of a concern for a report, and I believe the report was also the Gleaners, not JAMPs, that took a look, as they do from time to time, on how our political representatives or members of parliament are faring in terms of the expenditure of the 20 million that is allocated. And I say allocated, Mr. Gooden, because I'm amazed at how many citizens, including journalists, are not aware that the MP don't get 20 million. So the Gleaner was checking to see of the 20 million that is allocated to each constituency, not MP, how much has been spent, considering that we were 3/4 into the year. And I thought that's one way of measuring performance, not in its entirety. And the concern was that there were two members of parliament that stood out. There was one PNP, Lisa Hanna in particular, and I believe Marsha Smith for the JLP. I think Marsha's case was egregious because it was pretty much next to nothing. And Ms. Hanna said she had spent 3/4 and planned to spend the rest in the final quarter, which seemed reasonable. But that allowed them to reach out to me to say, what do you think of it? And I said, no, let's talk about the accountability issues of the policy and the program, not just that issue. So I shared with them the fact that I think that the CDF program has gotten an unfair treatment from the media over the last, I would say, 10 years. Things have improved, Mr. Golding, and where they have, we should celebrate them. And what I mean by that is, pick up any Gleaner report, and I'm guaranteeing you will see the words. And I tried it last night. I pulled up two. And the words are CDF trough, CDF pork, political farmyard, wasteful slithering in pork, and it goes on and on and on. So I came to JAMP in 2019 with the idea that if we are about accountability to get citizens interested, why don't we start with a Constituency Development Fund? Why don't we tell the citizens how many meetings are being held, because the policy requires every other year for the MPs to meet? Why don't we collect the reports from the MPs, place them on our website, on every MP's page, so that citizens can see what the MPs say he has done or her or has not done? Not for us, Mr. Golding, to hold the MPs to account, but to put citizens in a position where they can better do that. And so what we discovered, for example, and I was sharing with the Gleaner, is that I have a concern that there are members of parliament who don't meet with their constituents to determine how would the constituents like the monies to be used. Now, the policy clearly says, if you don't meet, you don't get no money. I don't need to tell any citizen that has not been the case.
Yes.
So that was one concern I had.
What they are perhaps doing is that they're just sitting down and writing up the projects on the back of an envelope.
That is what I'm told. And that is not what the parliamentarians contemplated. Largely, I believe you, Mr. Golding, in 2008, when we moved over from SESP to CDF. I want to say to the citizens listening that I came into JAMP with a biased view of what the CDF was. But out of some sense of fairness, I said, well, if I go and track this thing for citizens, let me go meet with the unit. Having done that, I read the policy. I was extraordinarily impressed with the policy itself, save and except for two things, which I shared with the Gleaner. In 2015, the policy, when you wrote it in 2008, said every 3 years it must be reviewed. I want to commend the government because they actually have been doing that. So 2015 it was reviewed, 2019 it was reviewed, and the Ministry of Finance is currently reviewing it, which is why I'm happy we're talking about it. But think about it, Mr. Golding. If we allocate 20 million per constituency, and we're talking about accountability, why is it every other year the MPs are supposed to meet with the citizens to consult with them about what they want and to report to them on what they have done? That's a little problematic.
Pause there, Jeanette, because nobody can fault you. I mean, why every 2 years? That's the question you asked, and I can't give you an answer to that. But you made a very important point that the people should really take ownership of the program and monitor it carefully, no? But what is the mechanism for them to do that? Now, the original concept, as I had outlined in the ministry paper, was that each constituency was to have a consultative committee, which would have representatives of both major political parties and community representatives, and to make sure that no MP is able to kind of, manhandle the thing. The community representatives would be appointed by the Costas, and that committee would be responsible for identifying the project. So it's not the MP can sit down and write up anything on the back of an envelope. Identifying the projects, monitoring the projects, and would be required to submit a report annually to Parliament to say, now look, this is how the 20 million has been spent. These are the projects that were identified. This is how the projects were executed. Here is our report on it. Now, all of that seems to have fallen by the wayside. And so I put the question to you. What do we need to do if we want to engage the citizens? What do we need to do in terms of the structure so that they can get involved? Because right now, I don't know, what do they do? They can't call a committee meeting.
My place is always, and that is only one message I have on any conversation I have, is the citizens have to get involved. I'm past the point of waiting on our politicians, and I'm past the point of blaming them. I am saying they don't, for example, JAMP, as I've said to you, on every member of Parliament, our MP track on our website has a profile of each parliamentarian, where we collect data and we present it in an easy-to-read graphic manner on, say, attendance in the House. One of them is CDF information. So we're making that accessible to the citizen. Another thing we're doing, Mr. Golding, is we have a 2-minute animated video that explains the process. I'm amazed, delightfully so, because of the interest it garners when you share it with a citizen. But what I find is whenever they understand what is supposed to happen, you can see their eyes begin to light up. So what do? Let's start talking to them. JAMP is not waiting on the parliamentarian. JAMP is engaging the citizen, letting them know some simple things. I give you one. When you say to the citizens, did you know that of the 20 million, there are 6 categories? 6 categories dealing with, let's say, economic employment, disaster management, sports, education. The MP can't just pen it as them have a mind. Really, Ms. Calder said, no, and better than that, this is what our parliament said. Maximum X amount on education, minimum X amount on education. So, Mr. Golding, they're amazed when you share with them there is structure and there's guidelines, and that I give you one more. In 2020, the Auditor General did a report. Did you hear any scandals? I didn't. Why? It was a relatively good report. And the negative things that came out of the report, the unit was able to come back to the AG and say, AG, accounting mistake. AG, check it. Things are good again. So, Mr. Golding, what I'm saying is the narrative for me is part of the problem. Let us stop portraying this program. Personally, I want to see our MPs moving away from it. But right now, I don't see any MP in the House I don't see anybody being able to get the majority of the MPs to agree to that. So what JAMP is saying is, I'm not trying to mash down CDF. I'm trying to get the citizens engaged in the way you described it, and I think the accountability will improve and the service they get will improve. I do not believe the corruption problem is as bad as we have made it out.
Yeah, but let us pursue that a little more who it is that is going to decide that, well, look, we can't fix all the road. $20 million can't fix all the road, but
can't touch that.
But this your particular one, it need a walk-foot bridge for the them to get to school. Who is to make that decision? Is it some bureaucrat sitting in an office in Kingston? Is it at the community level, where the community knows? They know their issues and they know their own priorities.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Mr. Holt, I don't think I can add or subtract to the mechanism you described a while ago. I didn't even know you had laid that out before. So the first thing I'm going to do is find that ministry paper, because the Ministry of Finance is currently, Mr. Golding, reviewing the policy. This is a great time to go back and say, listen, this is what was conceived in the get-go. Can we go back towards this mechanism?
Well, the other issue...
I am saying...
Go ahead, Janet. Go ahead.
No. I really just wanted to say that the bottom line for me is, even as it is now, with all its weaknesses, I believe, just based on engaging citizens on it, that if they have the information about how it works and what are the rules and what are the structure, I believe citizens will begin to engage. When they begin to engage, I believe we can have a conversation about that mechanism. that you mentioned earlier. I just wanted to focus on letting the citizens know how this thing works and how it benefits them.
No, there have been several calls in Parliament from both sides of the aisle, understandably,
for more.
For it to be increased. Now,
exactly.
If it was introduced as 20 million in 2008,
mm-hmm.
I mean, what it could have done in 2008.
It certainly can't do now.
It can't do that, no.
It can't.
Yeah? But I believe, before we talk about increasing it, and I believe it should be
mm-hmm.
increased, we have
mm-hmm.
to revisit the structure. I'm glad to hear that the Ministry of Finance is examining it. I hope they are going to consult with the MPs as well in doing that.
I would hope so.
But
I would hope so.
But if we can tighten the structure, if we can improve the accountability and so on, and ensure that there is community involvement without which the money can be dispersed.
Correct.
Then I would strongly advocate that it be increased to a reasonable level so that it can have some impact, because it makes
let me give you some
it makes a world of difference. People. One of the things that I have learned over the years in representational politics is that sometimes one little something that may not cost more than $500,000 has a greater impact in a community than if you build some everlasting something that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. You're getting to people where it really where it matters. It affects their lives.
Yeah, but I tell you, one of the concerns I do have, I really do share the view that I don't know if it's most, but many citizens, and I know certainly journalists do, that I think this does distract from a job that members of Parliament have. And I know I might be simplifying it, you're in a better position to correct me, but I really feel, Mr. Golding, that if we really start to spend more time on policy that can make a difference let's say pass, for instance. Can we improve the way in which benefits come and flow through pass so that we have to depend less on parliamentarians to be involved in identifying beneficiaries and distributing benefits that come through public funds? In principle, I do have a problem with it. I just recognize the need now, but I really would like to encourage us to move away from that and get the policies that's in the Parliament, that the Parliament has made right, so that, for example, PAT can do better than it is doing. PAT can respond quicker, because that's what the MPs are saying. We feel that we can respond quicker. But guess what, Mr. Golding? It's the same agencies they're going back,
Yes, it's the agencies that carry the work, right?
So why can't the agencies in the first place provide it without getting the MPs directly involved? Because there is a potential transactional relationship with two needs. The citizens have applied. The MPs have to go face the constituency in a couple of years. And we do appreciate that the benefits do translate into something that can be potentially detrimental to the democracy, corruption, and patronage.
Which is why the insulation, by having community involvement, by having bipartisan
can
involvement,
help, but go a long way. That is true. It would go a long way.
One of the things that I understand the point you're making, and I was saying earlier that in countries like Canada and Europe and America and so on, which are far more developed than we are, their MPs, the MP in Canada don't worry about these things. That is left to some different level of government somewhere. We haven't got to that stage yet. And one of the things that the program was intended to do was to provide a kind of flexibility, a kind of quick response. That if you have a fund that has 5 categories of expenditure and something comes up, you should be able to get all of the officers and all. This is an emergency. It falls within the guidelines. I'm recommending.
Yes. But I can imagine, though, Mr. Golding, I can. I've said it all the time. We write good legislation. We do really good at policy. I believe that our policymakers can come up with a mechanism within the state, an organ of the state, designed to do precisely that very same thing. Because it's the same organs the MP turning to once he hears of the plight, and it's the same organs that are going to have to respond. So I have the confidence that if we set our minds in that direction, we can do that. I just want to give you one bit of good news. 2 months ago, I was watching the CDF Parliamentary Committee. By the way, I never know we have such. Most citizens don't know. That's why we have to talk to them about the process. And I'm watching this on PBCJ. Congratulations. 2 years ago, they didn't cover this, Mr. Golding. The government is responding to transparency. Now they cover the CDF committee meetings in Parliament. But what did I hear 2 months ago? The chair of the committee Member Juliet Holness, and the director of the CDF unit, warning MPs that going forward into 2023, if they do not meet and have those consultations, money will not flow. I felt really good about it. JAM's job is to say it as often as I can and hold them to account. But it's good news to hear that the committee has decided that time comes to improve the accountability around what you say. Let the citizens decide and give them a say. So good things are happening. The policy is being reviewing. The Auditor General 2 years ago came out with a relatively good report. I feel good. I would love to go look at the paper that you shared with me a while ago, so I can continue to share it because it sounds like a good plan to deepen the citizen engagement in that way. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your comments because I think you have added value to the discussion. And particularly coming from you, because I'm one of them. I'm an old politician myself, so I have a particular perspective. But coming from you in terms of the objective approach, it needs improvement. But as it is at the moment, I think that we need to preserve it and we need to improve it.
No problem. Anytime, Mr. Cooling. It's a real pleasure joining you.
Thank you so very much, Jeanette.
All the best.
Ms. Jeanette Calder, she's the Executive Director of the Jamaica Accountability Meetup Portal. It's an important NGO, they're a kind of watchdog, as their name says, accountability. And they focus on government activity, government expenditure, government legislation. It's an important part of the citizenry. People better understand. And Jeanette made a very important point as well, that citizens, you can't just complain, you have to become more involved. You have to become part of the oversight, part of the monitoring. Demand your involvement. Demand that you be consulted. Demand that you be engaged. Instead of simply demanding for road to be fixed and demanding for water to be provided. Become part of governance. That's what democracy is all about. We're coming up to the break, and we're going to take the break now, and then we link back with you to continue the discussion on the Constituency Development Fund. Is it ill-conceived, or is it something of value? Is it something that needs to be improved? And very importantly, as Jeanette was pointing out, do we need to make sure that people are more informed as to how it operates, how it functions, how it is monitored? As she said, the Auditor General did a review of it and came up with a good report. And she told you about the CDF meeting that is chaired, the committee that's chaired by Juliet Holness, and the strictures that they are laid down for 2023, requiring MPs to have their consultations with the communities before they come and expect to get disbursement, because they say if you don't have those discussions with the community, you're not going to get no money out of the fund. So good things are happening. Let's take the break. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. We've been discussing today the Constituency Development Fund, which, as I said, is an issue of some controversy. We had a very interesting discussion a short while ago with Ms. Jeanette Calder of the Jamaica Accountability Meetup Portal. And I wanted to continue the discussion on this subject because I believe it's important. Some very useful ideas came out of that discussion with Jeanette. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to truncate the program today. So I'm going to have to leave you in the hands of my studio engineer. And we'll be back next week, hopefully, to be back to normal business. But have a good week, start of the year. Blessings for the rest of the year. Let's do some good things this year. Let's make a difference. God bless you. See you next week.